Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the second session of Transform Work and Welcome. My name is Aidan Gallagher, and I'll be your MC for today's speaker panel with Cara Simon, Chris Curran, Sharon Keegan, and Deirdre Lawler. As you may know, the Transform series is a new free online seminar that explores the growing impact of digital transformation on business and society. We'll be covering a total of 6 areas, ranging from the future of work to smart cities and communities, the circular economy, and many more. Today, however, we're focusing on the future of work and probably in particular on remote working in light of the recent pandemic. We're delighted to be joined by Cara Simon, co-founder and COO of Learn International, Sharon Keegan, founder and CEO of peachy.com, Chris Curran, an experienced financial service executive at Irish Life, and Deirdre Lawler, operations director, UK and Ireland at EVO Payments. Please feel free to send in your questions during the session using the Q&A function. You'll find it at the bottom of your screen. Please be aware that the chat function is disabled, so what you normally would have used for chat, please don't use that, only use the Q&A, so only use the Q&A tab. We will then compile the questions and I'll ask the panel to address as many as we can within the timescale. So looking forward to your questions, and please just remember to use the Q&A function as opposed to the chat function. So with no further delay, I'm going to hand you over to our speakers to do a quick introduction for themselves. So, Cara.
Hi, everyone. I'm joining you from upstate New York, visiting my parents. I've been here for a little while, thanks to remote working. So I'm Cara, CEO and co-founder of Learn International. And briefly, it's always, you can get into all the details of what your company does, but our primary market is American universities. And so we bring university students, graduate students over to Europe, predominantly to study. We also work in Asia and South Pacific. And then right before COVID happened, we started branching off into Europe. So students would come maybe with a professor, say a professor of digital marketing, and they want to understand how the Irish companies utilize digital marketing within their networks. And so we would set up their whole program for maybe 2 weeks, and they'd bounce around, do culture activities, things of that nature, and get credit for it. Or maybe they do an internship. So one of you guys needs a master's student who needs some experience, and we'd set them up with you. So roughly, that's what we do.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Cara. Sharon, maybe just a quick introduction.
Hi guys, how's it going? I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'm Sharon. I'm the founder of a company called Peachy. So in essence, I sell confidence and support in form of spandex and nylon. And to anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's basically shapewear for women that can be worn in the gym. We started 2 years ago from the kitchen table, and we're still here, guys, running selling in 23 countries across the world. That's it.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sharon. Chris?
Hi everyone, my name is Chris Curran. I work in Irish Life, which I hope is known to most of you if you're based in Ireland. We are kind of leading provider of a number of different financial services in the Irish market, including obviously protection, life insurance and mortgage stuff, investment savings, pensions. Also, we have a health business. We've 1.4 million customers, pretty much touch every household in the country, which is a great privilege and responsibility. We have about 2,000 employees, and obviously when COVID hit, we had to get them out of the building. I work in the Innovation Hub, and my job is to connect with the outside world, find insights, technology partners and businesses that we can partner with, bring them in, and then land them in the business to drive business growth.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, and Deirdre?
Hi everyone, my name is Deirdre Lawler and I work for EVO Payments. We were founded in 1989 and we are a principal member of Visa and MasterCard. So we stretch across the USA, Canada, Mexico and Europe. We are one of the largest payment processors in the world. So we offer solutions from physical point of sales to e-commerce, mail order, retail solutions and ATMs. We transact in 130 different currencies in the world and over 50 global markets. And we process over $100 billion in volume, and we support more than 550,000 merchants across the world. I'm the operations director for the UK and Ireland, so I am responsible for the delivery of all services to all our merchants and customers in both markets.
Thanks, Deirdre. Okay, just before we kick off with some questions, just want to remind people to use the Q&A function to submit any questions. So just going to kick off with a general question first, and something I'd be particularly interested in. For a number of years, I think business leaders have advocated a better balance of home-based and office working. And then suddenly with COVID, this kind of became mandatory. So something that people could consider all of a sudden was something you had to do. So I'm just interested in the panel's experience. Has this had a positive or negative effect generally on business performance, but also individual productivity? So maybe Deirdre, as you're on, if you maybe take that first.
Yeah. So overall, we've seen it as a very positive experience. For an employee's point of view, there's a better work-home life balance. People are spending more time with their children now that they're off school, definitely needing to juggle a bit more. We've also seen improved confidence in our staff, and they have more confidence in their abilities now because they're having to do it without as much support, definitely improving. So they're getting a little bit quicker and a lot more confident in what they're doing. The other thing it did is create better team morale for us. It's a little bit, we're all in this together. So I think everyone's more supportive, even more so as we are. And it also, one of the major things it did for the people from a staff point of view for me is it actually highlighted their weaknesses and their strengths. So it told us what we need to work on in the future to make them stronger employees, and that they have the confidence in themselves going forward. From a business point of view, we saw a 71% decrease in our inbound phone calls. We're still trading, it's still, even with lockdowns, it didn't affect us too badly, thankfully. We all got together to understand how we can support our merchants, whether they need breaks in their services, obviously with lockdowns, etc. But because we've changed how we work, we saw the 71% decrease, but we also saw 1,441% increase in web chats. So it showed the difference of where we could move it. So as a business, we just changed how we supported it. And we've also seen a 13% increase in customer satisfaction, which obviously for us was huge. And that to us means everything. That's all we worry about. That's our main point of focus at all times. The other thing it did is help us drive the business forward with more digital and technology platforms. So it pushed us to go forward and make those changes. And I think it allowed the rest of the world to agree with it and for merchants to accept that a little bit more than they had in the past. People wanted to get someone on the phone. So it's also proved to us we can support the business from home. As I said, with the satisfaction increase, that means we can do this from home. So it means you can look forward to different options going forward and how much space do you actually need in an office. We were very lucky. We managed to get into a digital office within 2 hours. So we changed the whole business. We were all office based, and all of a sudden within 2 hours, we had virtual offices set up across the globe. We've used different ways of helping support our merchants, but overall, very positive experience. 1 or 2 negatives, obviously, but thankfully, overall, it's been very positive.
Great, and actually, it's very interesting to hear figures to back things up. So that's rather than just a feeling about it. So it's interesting. So anybody else from our panel like to contribute?
Yeah, I think certainly we have found that there's obviously, in terms of people working, there's been a huge shift from inputs in terms of being at your desk to actual outputs in terms of what you're producing during the day. So I think that's been a huge positive. I would say is in terms of our business, we didn't really know what to expect at the beginning of this. So we actually did a piece of work with the DCU Business School to look at the effect of previous pandemics. So, this is the first we've seen in Ireland in the last century, but you've had H1N1, bird flu, swine flu, all the others. So I think what we found was that there's a huge change in consumer behavior. You become much more health focused. You become much more concerned about your health insurance. You become much more concerned about your life insurance. You spend less because you're in lockdown. So your savings increase. So actually, we were able to say, this could actually be quite positive for a business. And I think that's actually broadly turned out to be the case. But I think unlike the economy, where certain sectors are affected very differently from other sectors, you're seeing different types of people hit very differently. So I think certainly from being on a lot of Zoom calls, people with young kids are really getting the raw end of the deal from working from home. So whereas if you have if your kids are grown up and moved out, or you're working from your garage, or you're a showmra, I think that's a very, very different experience.
Okay.
I'd like to jump in there. I'm one of them people that have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I've had incidents where my children would come in with poo on the shoe when I was in the middle of investor meetings. So I think people have a little bit more compassion, and I think we're a little bit more relaxed in business. I think that people are understanding as well. So it's just a nicer environment to work in.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that. One of our employees, the same thing, she has 2 little ones, and is having COVID baby. So she's got all those things and working on her accounts. So I think just something as employers, it's a good reminder of yourself to be flexible, and like our traditional standards or whatever they may be, we have to work within those boundaries for everyone. Us as a small business, we have pretty awesome staff, and we were kind of set up remote before all of this because we had staff in other countries. I fly a lot back and forth from the US. So we were, I think, lucky in that sense that we had some of that infrastructure already set up, but we've only enhanced that over the past, 8-9 months. So.
Great, Cara, thanks. So that, look, I think that's really interesting. I mean, obviously, I think the feedback is positive. One of the questions maybe we might come back to, which would be logical follow on from it, is what's going to happen when everything goes back to normal. I'd just be interested in people's views. Are we going to go back to a hybrid scenario? Are we going to go get into a split where people work 100% at home? So we might come back to that later if that's okay. So just another question, and this probably relates to, just as you said, different people have different environments. So everybody lives in different environments. Some obviously suit home working more than others. I was surprised, I'm very positive on home working, but I was really surprised when a friend of mine told me that several of his employees, who, even though they had ample space in their apartments, a suitable environment for home working, but they found the whole experience very stressful. And I think effectively what they said was they needed to be in an office environment, socializing, meeting people, even for just minimal social interaction. So I'm just interested what people's experience has been of that. While there might have been a positive business side of it, have you had feedback, that people have found this difficult in any ways?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So it's interesting, when I read this question beforehand, I was thinking about the staff that we have, and some it really suits. And again, those are the ones I think that were hired on as remote workers. And we'd fly them over a couple times a year just, so they can get kind of the vibe of the office and things like that. A lot of us who are in the office, I'd say 75% of us prefer the office. And I was thinking about this, my background, I used to be a therapist way back when, not to get all, psychoanalytical, but everyone's personality is different. I mean, you have extroverts, introverts, you have people who are more autonomous in working, people who like team player, like a lot of collaborative work. And I think it comes down to the type of worker that you are, who prefers one way or the other. Like my own self, I actually prefer an office, because for so many years when we were getting going, didn't have an office, I couldn't separate work and home, right? I think something else to think about is we've been mandated to work from home in Ireland, but a lot of people do remote work all the time. Maybe they go to a cafe. I mean, I work brilliantly with that background noise, and I can focus for like 8 hours stopping with my cold coffee that I should have bought like 3 more when I'm sitting at their table. Libraries, pubs, you name it, so it works for a certain kind of personality, I think. But going back even to the previous question, I mean, we have to make do with what we're given. And right now is we all have to work remotely. And so we just have to support our teams. So we did a lot of talking about it. Probably to the extent where people are annoyed. So I'm like the talker, what are your feelings? So I do a lot of that with our team, but I think it really helps people feel at ease. They're like, I just can't get this done because my kiddo is ABC, because they can't go to creche anymore, right? So it's just working all together and picking up each other's slack during this time. And eventually it irons out, right? You get into a flow, a rhythm, and everyone's got their kind of jam going on.
Very good. Okay. Anyone else like to jump in?
One of the things we noticed as well is age had a major factor in it. So for some of the younger staff who were sitting at home in the family home, they found it a lot more difficult. So I do think that situation made a huge difference to our employees. We only had about 5%. We were an essential service, or we still are. So thankfully we could bring some in and support them in that. But I do think it's quite difficult if it's not their home and they're the family home and their parents are trying to work from home, etc. So it is quite difficult. But again, I think businesses are more acceptable to the background noise and the distractions we all have. I think it's really good that we have changed that from it having to be perfectly professional from home to understanding people have lives.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. I personally much prefer working from home myself. Now, I am a very social person. I like to be in people's energy, but I was always very distracted in an office, and I feel being a mum of 2 young children, I can be very focused at home, especially if they're in childcare and I have a certain amount of time to do something. So that's just my, what I prefer. But my team definitely would much prefer to be in an office. And I think obviously being a founder, you do want to have a leaner operation. So it's having a great impact on a digital business like mine that we can actually work from our houses.
Great, thank you.
I think there's an interesting question here, Aidan, about I think what we've done in the reaction to COVID in the kind of the now and the next period is we've adjusted logistically to kind of getting work done and taking care of our customers or whatever. I think there's a bigger question of what is the office completely irreplaceable, or does it actually do something that can't be, that's very hard to do elsewhere? And so there's certainly a social element to it that we've already discussed, that people get, humans are pack animals. We want to check in and be connected in some way. I think there's a kind of a team trust and collaboration piece that is, you've seen all these tools brought out to try and kind of replace that and make it easier to kind of to informally talk with your colleagues, whether it's through Slack or Zoom or whatever. The thing that actually I think Sharon just mentioned there, which I think is really interesting, is that energy sense. I find it, I didn't realize, but I pick up enormous energy from being in a room with other people, and I think that's actually a very difficult thing to replace. So I think there's when we talk about what the future holds, and certainly it probably won't go back to the way it was. I think how we solve those, or how we address or understand or deal with those kind of phenomena will be very interesting.
Okay, excellent. Okay, next question. This is just something I came across personally, and I'm not sure what people's experience of it has been, but I've heard of several situations where businesses, typically the smaller owner, smaller managed businesses, basically have been very reluctant to allow home working. They'll do it when it's literally mandated by a government regulation, but the minute the government regulation is gone, they want people back in the office again. So I suppose first question is, have other people seen this? And then, what do you think it's down to? Is it a lack of trust of employees, trusting your employees to do their job remotely? Is it an outdated mindset? Just, people have been used to working in an office environment and they just don't think anything else is going to work right? Or is there some kind of skepticism about a lack of proof points to demonstrate the effectiveness of remote working? And I suppose, have any of those been addressed over the last 9 months? So whoever wants to jump in first.
I think it's a bit of all of that personally. I do think there is, depending on the type of business, obviously it's quite difficult. For us, our biggest concern is the customer support element inside of the business. So finance, risk, etc. can all work from home. For that, they depend on each other and they work as a team. It's making sure your answer rates are up, the phones are answered. It's also, if we have an IT issue, we control it. If it's at home, they control it. And there is a little bit of that, and having the support that we have for them. We've been quite pleasantly surprised about how well we did it. And I do think it'll end up being a sort of a hybrid model going forward. But that was our biggest concern, was the support. We've adjusted it and checked our KPIs so that we can monitor efficiencies and make sure everyone's supported. But I do think, a bit like both Chris and Sharon were saying, a lot of it for us will be the energy and the culture of the business, and how do you instill that culture if everyone's working from home. And we've kept the teamwork going, but there's only so much you can do if you're all separated.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, Deirdre, which is the whole idea of culture. Like, are we all, is there a stock of cultural understanding that we've all built up from being working face to face that we're depleting every day and that eventually runs out? Or is culture kind of a vibrant thing that kind of continues on?
Yeah, so we've managed to keep it. My concern would be a lot of new starters coming in the business. How do you get them into the culture? So if you've been there a few years, I think you have it to an extent. But I also think, I know with our business being global, there is still a stronger culture between the Irish team that work together all the time and the English team that work together and the US. There isn't the same dynamic between us and the US as there would be within the office. And I know right now we're not within the office, but I do wonder in a year or two's time, would you lose that? And then you end up with so many new starters. I also wondered, would you have more of a turnover of staff because you don't have the same loyalty because they're not bought into the teamwork and the family and etc. that we all try to provide in our businesses. And I think that could be a huge risk to a lot of businesses.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, it's difficult to attract talent anyway, and to attract young talent on a screen, with no culture and no interaction and energy, or fun, because this is what they want is to have a fun work-life balance. That will be increasingly difficult and have a massive ripple effect in the coming years. So I would wonder how that, how they feel, because if they we've recruited this year, we've gone from a team of 4 to 8, and it's actually an interesting question now that I will actually go off and ask them, how do they feel? We have never met each other person to person, so it's an interesting dynamic. I had to actually make a phone call on this one this morning, because obviously I'm a very small team in comparison to who we're on here with today. But I made a phone call because of this person having to go to work when they were made go to work in lockdown situation, and their answer was really lack of control, and it was really around the demographic of person in management, because of they felt maybe that they wouldn't have the same control in a digital space or digital management space. Yeah. So really that was his answer. It was kind of a little part of everyone, but definitely a lack of control.
Okay.
I agree with everything that everyone has said. I think it's a little bit of everything. And I think as a small business owner, I can see the part where you might feel you don't trust someone, or the control, you've lost it because not everyone's right in front of you and you can't micromanage them. But then there's also this space where you have to let people own their stuff. Like, this is their role, this is their job, and you support them in that role. I think that's probably a lot of what I've learned in the role that I'm having, because in the beginning you're like, no, it has to be done this way. And then you're like, oh no, you're an intelligent human with great ideas. Why don't you just roll with it? And then I'm here if you need backup. So I think a lot of that has to do with the type of culture within the company to begin with, and how you foster that. And then because of that culture, you hire people that kind of fit into that. I mean, it doesn't always work out to that level, but when I'm interviewing, I ask particular questions, or I get other members of the team to kind of get an understanding or an energy about that person, will they fit? And I do think we haven't recruited during this remotely, but I think that will be a challenge, as I think Sharon and Deirdre were saying, for future, is how do you hire someone, but I mean, I've done it with remote workers and never met them, and it's worked out, but it's a lot of extra work. It's a lot of this face time, and you have to give that extra time to make it work in the long run, I think.
Okay, actually, just an interesting follow-on question, and we can go through it, but actually maybe I'll just raise it now, is does it raise the possibility that it's a lot easier for companies now to hire people in situ where they live, assuming there's good communications, whereas before the sort of assumption was people had to come to Dublin to work in Ireland or to a population centre? Are people a lot more accepting now of recruiting somebody remotely down the country somewhere, and they now have the proof points to say this can actually work?
Yeah, and I think, look, it's a great positive effect, because if you think about it, people commuting even from Carlow, say, into Dublin every day, they're sitting in traffic from up at 6 a.m. I don't know what time in the car, and 2 or 3 hours of their life gone. You know what I mean? Like, now they're up, obviously having more time to bring their children to school and logged on by 9 o'clock. So that will not only have an effect mentally on people, but also if you think about property prices in around major kind of cities, and people now can actually afford to buy a property because they don't have to work in the city anymore. So I think it's a really positive way of looking at the future of work, especially for digital companies like myself, to hire not only in Ireland, but outside Ireland also.
Great.
Yeah, broadens the pool of people you have there as well, and the skill types you need, and definitely it's a good opportunity for us all going forward.
I think for me what's interesting there, Aidan, is the new business models that unleashes. I mean, if you can actually form a completely virtual company across 10 different countries with all the expertise that you want, that's incredibly cost competitive, where nobody's ever met or never needs to, you know, that could be a very powerful organization for, you know, incumbents who have office space to pay for it.
I think also one last thing, Deirdre, you had said it broadens your pool. And when we started sponsoring people visa-wise, you know, from other countries, which was an adventure, but worked out well. So that helped us kind of, because our field seems to be so niche and everyone thinks we're an English language school, but we need kind of different expertise. But in highlighting what you said, I also think there's a lot of, for example, stay-at-home moms that are craving some kind of interaction with people or just working again. And so that's a pool that would need maybe to be remote that we can tap into, just as an example. So I think it does kind of broaden a lot for all of us with hiring. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just moving on to the next question. Some businesses have managed the challenges of the last 9 months particularly well. What examples have you seen of companies being innovative in, you know, probably 2 areas? 1, enabling workers to work better from home, and 2, ensuring that social interaction well-being is prioritized at the same time?
I'm going to jump in here because I actually interviewed a company very recently who I just found done phenomenal over the COVID period. Now they're on the front line. It's Lidl actually, and they were so good to their staff in a sense of I suppose in their work schedule, they made sure they gave them time at home, and also they were in pods. They also gave their staff incentives to, it was a scheme called Feed Your Mind, and it allowed them to study while at home. So they actually fully paid for their degree while they were full-time paid as well. So it kind of gave them in the downtime something to do. And I thought that was phenomenal to do that, because they were on the front line and providing service for us all. They were phenomenal in store in the sense that they really looked after their staff and also people coming in the doors. They were one of the first retailers to put a traffic light system on their doors, and also they had like this special WhatsApp group for people who were very wary of COVID and they wouldn't have to queue. So for instance, they would get a time slot and they would like give them the VIP service. And I just thought it was such a great way to treat the public and also their staff in such a difficult time. I couldn't find actually someone to interview at the time, and maybe the two companies are here, these global companies, on what they provided for their staff at home. So maybe we'd ask that question to the panel actually.
Yeah, I know from our point of view, actually, we worked really well with our healthcare provider, and they provided a lot of webinars on financial well-being, mental health well-being, and we did them during office hours, and we put staff on them. So we did a lot of that. We also made sure that the CEO, due to him being in the US and not being able to visit us, he did actually monthly videos that he sent to all the staff, thanking them for their hard work and asking them for suggestions, and we took suggestions back. And then they also did some fitness online courses during the day to keep people moving. So I think little things like that got everyone more involved. We've all obviously been on a lot more Zoom calls. And one of the other things we made sure is we planned interaction. So in the office, as we discussed earlier, you bump into people, you meet people in the kitchen. Now everything is a lot more planned, but it is ensuring that we get to every employee. So you have to do that planning. So there's changes there, but I do think the different one, our healthcare provider was particularly good. They sent us weekly emails offering support and stuff. But the webinars were definitely a huge benefit to staff.
Great.
We did something similar, but just on a smaller scale, just within our own team, is we actually went remote officially with our office in Nace, I think a week before the lockdown. So what we did is just said, take whatever you need from the office to make your, workspace whatever it needed to be. And that also after lockdown, people kept going in and being like, oh, I need this chair, or I need this and this and this. So just helping them to be set up comfortably. Just knowing that everyone has different work environments. Like one of our employees has it in her bedroom, and it's, that's where she's able to do it. And something we did kind of right away. So we always did we had a once a week staff meeting, but we kind of amped those up. So every morning at 9, we had a 30-minute chat but it wasn't about work. It was just like, you know, talking about the web, whatever you wanted to talk about for 30 minutes. And it always actually went longer than 30 minutes and it was fine. But that kind of kept the socialization going. And it also allowed myself and Chris, my partner, to get a feel on what they were feeling, where their head was at. Because you could tell when you see someone's face, you can kind of tell, is it a rough day? You know, or is it like, okay, I'm ready to rock and roll? And so sometimes we would just even talk about that stuff or talk about our challenges. Yeah. We started also a blog. It was on, like, I feel like this whole time has been all these to-do lists that are getting done for us, which is really helpful because business has slowed so much. But one of them was having a company blog. And what I did is I asked each employee to write a blog. So that way, and we gave topics to everybody and they could choose, but through their writing, sometimes it was kind of, oh, I can see that they're struggling here, or it gave them like this outlet, a space to think about something else versus all the crap going on in the world. So we just did little things like that. WhatsApp groups, we kind of have one ongoing. We send all kinds of things just to keep checking in, and we have time zone differences too. So we're not always the best at remembering that it's like 3 a.m. somewhere, but you'll wake up to a text. That's not a culture for everybody, but it works well with what we're in, the space we're in.
Yeah, I think just with Irish Life, we quite early on, I think EY had a very good article about responding to the crisis, which introduced this kind of lens of now, next and beyond. So the now is, we've got to take care of customers, we've got to get staff safe. So that was get everyone out of the building and get, you know, let's get our hands on some hardware and get it into their hands and get it operational. So there's a kind of big logistical piece to that was, you know, that's not negligible. And a lot of people put a lot of time into making that happen as seamlessly as possible. So that was a challenge. I think then you work on to, okay, we're now all connected and able to work, but we have to adjust our ways of working. And I think that's, and we've talked about, there's a getting stuff done piece, but then there's a softer side of how we all feeling about that. And I think it's easy to get, you know, cynical about duck races and beer tasting and bingo, but they actually do form, there are an attempt at least to form some kind of, to replace that social bond. I think the beyond piece is actually interesting in terms of how, I think, what will never go back to being what it was. I think that's the piece. You can't really see the future, but I think certainly, you get the feeling that not, will we all just be back in the office 5 days a week? I don't think so. And I think what companies can do best is give clarity and talk about their thinking about that as it evolves. And I think the best of company practices being to give certainty about, okay, you're not back in the office till next March or whatever it is. And I think, you know, having an open discussion about that, I think is interesting.
Yeah, one of the things I think will really be affected is I don't believe people will travel as much. With the cost of the business, never mind, we now realize we don't actually need to travel internationally quite as much as we all do. And I definitely think that will have a big change on business, because the savings, never mind the actual time people waste traveling, is massive when we can all just do it on Zoom. We've managed for 9 months, we can manage for longer. So that's the environment obviously as well. So we're all winning. Maybe
an interesting follow-on question just came into my head as you were going through that. Are you aware of any other companies doing anything interesting for Christmas parties, etc.? You know, how are they compensating for not having the typical Christmas party?
We're planning a Zoom call and a few drinks, and we've special guests and stuff coming. So we're trying to do something. It's a very difficult thing to do, and we have a lot of young employees that live for the Christmas party and are very disappointed they're not having one. We hope to have a summer party next year, but we'll do what we can this year.
Yeah. Needs most.
Yeah, we have a magician coming online tonight, actually, with a big gang of girls that we were on the CSF Enterprise Ireland CSF program together. So our Christmas parties tonight with a magician and a few drinks on a screen. I think we're all very zoomed out of it now at this stage. So you spend your whole day on Zoom, and then you have a list of work to do after Zoom calls. So I think we're working a lot harder these days as well. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that, everybody?
Well, I know from my point of view, being involved with a few different companies, to be honest, it's just difficult trying to come up with something new. I think, you know, if this was the first couple of months of lockdown, you'd get away with your Zoom, parties, etc. But you kind of have to keep trying to innovate, and you run out of ideas after a certain point. So
I've heard of some companies that are sending cocktail making kits to all of their employees on a Zoom call. They're all making the cocktails. It's great that people are coming up with innovative ways to do these things, and making us all think about it and actually make an effort rather than we just book dinner. So
exactly.
Something I think is really neat, talking, well, the holiday party, but even before that, our Christmas party. I'm an American now, so we say holiday for everything. Is the amount of creativity that's just come around, like our local enterprise. You get like so many awesome webinars that have come out. I thought I'd be webinared out by now, but it's been a really good way for myself, for the team, just to do something different. And then we've worked with, the business school at DCU quite a bit for different things, like this, for example, this panel discussion. So I think there's a nice part of all of this, if you can see a silver lining, is that we're all in this together. Like that's actually a legitimate statement, that we're all navigating this and mucking through it and doing the best that we can. And some really cool stuff is coming out of it. People are just going crazy with good ideas. So if we can keep that kind of going in the future, we'll be in a much better place even before COVID, I think.
Yeah, sorry, Cara, I think you make a very good point there that there's like, speaking for Irish Life, we're a very long-term financial services risk averse business, but I think there has been a greater risk tolerance. I think customers have been more indulgent if you get things wrong, if your heart was in the right place, much more so than they were. And I think that has allowed businesses to try different things and try and innovate. I think that's to be applauded, and hopefully it continues.
Okay. I suppose one thing, that obviously came to the fore during the last 9 months is, digital transformation itself. So, I mean, how much of an impact has digital transformation in business been a factor over the last 9 months from what you've seen? Everybody's, as we said, everyone's a Zoom expert at this stage, may not have known anything about it 9 months ago. But what other technologies have had an impact, or have you seen anything new or innovative in the technology area that kind of, came out of this response to the challenge? And maybe Chris, you could take that first.
Absolutely. I think digital transformation has obviously massively accelerated. I think businesses that had done hard work before the pandemic are seeing the benefit of that now, because the quicker you can move digital, the better. And certainly we would seen it in Irish Life. We'd have a lot of face-to-face advisors and salespeople, and there was a period of time when you needed to find a way to make that a virtual experience, and there's a lot goes on in a face-to-face meeting that you've actually almost got to unpack and unbundle and work out what can be done by how and by whom. So there's a lot of work to that, but I think that will stand to us going forward, and I think will stand to businesses that have made a digital transformation or a commitment to it, that they will do very well on the back of that. And I think we've seen all the stuff that allows us to work more casually, like Slack, and it's purchased by Salesforce. I think that's important. I think you mentioned, but I think as part of an innovation unit, we are a member of an accelerator, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a business that brings together startup technology companies with investors and with corporate partners who can do pilots and experiments with those companies and then make them more informed and more valuable. So there's a symbiosis there. So when we're attending there, we're seeing really interesting stuff happening in terms of you mentioned virtual conferences and travel. So they're trying to replace that conference experience of lukewarm coffee at 10:30 in the morning with complete strangers, but by having breakout rooms, a main stage, side stages, the ability to join a table randomly, to have a hall with stands. So they're really trying to make it so you really don't have to travel to go to those experiences. One interesting company we saw was a company called Burnalong, which we talked about mental health and exercise. So what they do is they allow you to go to an online exercise class, but with your friends and family and colleagues. So you can actually, you almost know who's going to be in the room. You're much more likely to attend if you actually have made an appointment to meet somebody at whatever the class is. It also uses local providers to provide the classes and so on in many cases. So it's an interesting kind of, it's the business, the corporate or the the workspace is providing that sponsorship so that you can actually bring friends and family to an exercise space. And the one that's, I think that we're seeing a lot, just there's a good few startups now just really kind of cresting the horizon, which is the idea of virtual offices. So it's augmented reality, whereby you put on a headset, you're sitting at your desk at home, but you're actually surrounded by your colleagues, and you can call over to Aidan or to Joanne and say, can you pass me the stapler or whatever it is, and it's a much richer experience and solves that fundamental collaboration problem that you might have, which is how do you have those almost work-ish meetings whereby you're actually talking about what the Crown that you binge watched last night, but actually you're solving work problems on the side of it because something comes up and you work out how to proceed on a project just almost incidentally to something. So I think the technology is so powerful. It can solve so many problems, and I would be very hopeful for the future that this will actually be a very positive effect on how people work.
Okay. So
Yeah, I think, as you said, Chris, there's a lot of it we had in the background, like the web chat, etc., that we just didn't use to its full potential. And I think it's pushed that type of thing forward. I think the likes of WebEx Teams, where you have whiteboards and you can do the virtual conferencing. But I thought one of the interesting things that we've actually partnered with a company called Banda in the last couple of days, and they actually have created an app for contactless food and drinks ordering. So it's one of the big things, but it's great seeing these apps be coming forward and new innovations coming. It wasn't something that's done in Ireland. I know you see it in other parts of the world. They're a little bit quicker on these things. But I think it's going to be a huge thing. Contactless ordering, especially with COVID, is massive, and it's something that will continue after COVID. When they started doing this development, it was pre-COVID. They didn't know this was coming. It has just been fruitful for them to help them bring it forward. And if we can stay out of lockdown for long enough, I'm sure it'll be a great success for them. So I do think it's interesting seeing all these businesses coming forward with new ideas.
great.
Yeah, same here. I was just thinking about a few of the things that we've done during this time. And so we had a CRM that wasn't suitable. So we've ended that and joined up with Zoho. So that's been a massive project for us, which in the long run will be better, right? Right now we want to pull our hair out implementing it, but it's fine. That's how it goes with those things. And we had to let go of some of our staff in the beginning just because of, no revenue in certain areas. So one of those areas was digital marketing. And so we have internalized a lot of that ourselves, which I actually kind of enjoy being creative again in that space. But we use Canva, which is a free software. A lot of people probably know it. I didn't, but I'm not in that space usually. And then Buffer, which helps us kind of, when you don't have someone dedicated to it all the time and you're splitting it amongst a few people, it's been great to be able to do that across different, again, time zones or whatnot. Another one people might know is Asana. I think that's really handy. If you have something like Salesforce, that's kind of built into there, but we didn't have that. So Asana is kind of like a to-do list, and you can tag people in it and check it off, and it's all free. They have a paid version, but the free is fine for small businesses if that's suitable. So it's kind of amazing when you start talking to people, they're like, oh, have you heard of this thing? Or have you heard of this app? And you can get a little bit overwhelmed sometimes. So you need to know what you need. But yeah, it's pretty impressive. And I was going to say one more thing we did. It sounds like people did a lot of kind of exercise offerings to their staff, which is good. We attempted this and we got, I think, 2 people to do it. And it was more kind of our partners at universities, but we did like a HIT program that was free off of YouTube. And we had a group chat about trying to motivate each other doing this exercise that I wanted to die. But it was good. It was a nice way to be social, with work folks, but not talk about work as well. So.
Great. Okay. If it suits, I'm just going to take a couple of the questions that are coming in from the participants as well. Molly, hopefully I'm doing the right thing by clicking answer live on these questions, just to be sure I'm doing it correctly. First one I'm going to just do that. Yeah, answer live. So
yeah, just press answer live.
Great. Okay, so the first one is to do with basically, do we think it's going to be difficult for companies to manage employee tax if they're based in another country? This might be an issue for some of our panel members, it may not be. Personally, I've seen it directly My daughter's partner is Irish, but has been on a visa in the US, working for one of the big five over the past few years. Came back to Ireland to work once the pandemic started, but then hit his number of days in Ireland, maximum number of days for tax reasons, and basically had to go back to New York, which was quite disruptive, and it was also quite difficult to get definite answers on this. So I just wonder, have you had any experience of this, either directly or indirectly?
So for us, because we're global and they're just paid from that country, so it's probably a little bit easier on us to organize that one. And if we're talking about remote working, they won't be traveling, they'd be staying in that country. So reasons it'd be all right with their visiting. You didn't have any
examples of, say, Irish nationals working over in your US office who then came back to Ireland to work, or anything like that?
No, we haven't had any major problems with it. We've managed it all right, but I think because we are global, it may be a little bit easier for us, and we partner with banks. It's probably more of a Chris question. Sorry, Chris.
Well, I know enough about the world of investment not to offer tax advice to anybody, but I suppose you hear apocryphal stories of people moving to Portugal to work. The furthest I've actually had a colleague move is down to Ennis, so I can't really. It's the same tax jurisdiction, I think. So I know certainly if you wanted to completely reinvent your business and hire people in Romania to replace your Irish workers, that is a huge tax nightmare. And putting on the Irish ink jersey, I hope it remains that way. But no, you haven't seen that yet. I think that's the emerging beyond space that will be interesting to watch.
Okay.
We hadn't had any experience with that either in this scenario. I could think about a scenario where we had someone in a different country and we had to get kind of waivers about their tax. So I would imagine would be the same in the future. If they're resident in that country technically, and then so we shall see.
Okay. Another question, raises an interesting topic, is, does working from home tell us that we need to reduce the working week? For instance, half day on Wednesday, or half day Friday, or half day Monday. Any views on that?
I think people have been a bit more relaxed. Like, I think, as I said before, we are working a lot harder, and we're working longer hours. Zoom calls seem to go on forever, and your list gets longer and longer. So I think in working sometimes, into the evening, if you want to take a half day, I think companies are a little bit more relaxed about that. And obviously, I'm a smaller business. I'm very relaxed. I just literally just want the job done. So I don't care if you get it done at 10 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock in the morning. It's a job-based business. But I know I do see companies, large corporations, just being a bit more relaxed with people. And if they need time, especially around mental health, because so much of us have struggled. Excuse me, now loads of emails going in. So many of us have really struggled not being around people or in offices or being a part of a team anymore. So I think that the empathy for people, if they need a bit of time to exercise during the day, go on a walk or take a bit of time off, I think that's there now.
I think it's actually an opportunity to redesign your workday. There was a very interesting speaker at a conference last week, the IIDB, from I think it's Stanford, but she was saying that you can actually your energy levels fluctuate throughout the day, and you actually have, this is an opportunity. You don't have to be stuck on a bus or a dart while your energy levels are soaring. You can actually you can change your day around to map to doing things at certain times that are more effective. So for example, my brother-in-law, I think, is on the call. He noticed that he used to get up and go for a run in the mornings, but then he noticed, actually, I'm really when I jump out of bed, I am on fire. I've got a whole evening's worth of thought that I will need to get down. So now he works for an hour the minute he gets out of bed, and he takes a run later on in the morning when he's kind of lower energy. So I think there's interesting things you can do there to kind of recode your day. But I think it is important at the end of the day to have some kind of separation ritual whereby you turn off the lights, or you turn off the heating, or you close down your laptop, and then just walk away mentally.
So
Yeah,
better
I would have said
balance.
rather than reducing the working week, it's actually making your week more flexible.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think you're actually reducing your hours. As Sharon has said, we're actually working longer hours, but you do have more flexibility and you're taking your travel time. So I don't believe we'll get to a place that businesses work 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Well, they will on reduced salaries and be part-time workers, but I do think there is a certain, we're not doing less work, we're doing more work. We're just more flexible about it.
Yeah, and I think it's a trade-off and a work-life balance, which is the right way. Okay.
Yeah, we have some employees, kind of like you, Sharon. It sounds like you just have a task and get it done. If there's a deadline, you know that deadline, which is whatever. But I think we have a good mix of people that like that structure. Like, I'm going to work my 9 to 5, but then we'll hop on when they need to. And then others of us, like me, I'll keep working. But I've also always done that. So I'll do laundry for an hour and take a break or do this and that, which is why for me, I do like the structure of leaving the house, even if it's to a cafe or something like that. So I think it's just, again, knowing your team and what each person's strengths are and the areas that maybe they need to work on, and helping them formulate that, work-life balance in the future. But I think the flexibility has been pretty amazing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you are working longer, or it feels longer because it's not done at a certain time. But be curious to see what kind of, after this is all over, because it will be over, what the outcome is.
I think most people appreciate the flexibility, as I say, the ability to get up in the morning and say, I'm better off to put my time in here now for an hour and then switch around, something that wasn't always easy to do in an office environment. Okay. So another question is, do we think people will adopt, or businesses will adopt to working at home in the future? And if the answer is yes, does it mean students with digital knowledge and qualifications will be preferred for hiring? So I suppose very relevant for the audience on the mini conference.
Some of that, to me, I think would be the type of business that you have. We're very front facing, which is, I don't know that our travel will decrease, to be honest with you, because we spend a lot of our time at universities chatting with faculty and, directly, like all the folks there. So it's an interesting question. I think there is going to be a gap with the digital age coming, and folks that, are maybe 20 years older who are having to catch up and learn some of these things. But if it's presented in a way and people are hired in a way that people work together, you can build kind of the student, the younger person is teaching this person about how to, manage Zoom, where this person has a world of experience. So it can be mutually beneficial that way. But I think going back to something you said earlier is like hiring remotely, that culture isn't built into that person necessarily because they're not face to face, right? So you have to think about all those kinds of steps, because someone might be great digitally, but they may not know how to have a telephone conversation, which I find a lot these days.
Okay.
I think there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to redesign meetings that we haven't yet taken, and I think that we should. I think what we've done is replace face-to-face meetings with Zoom calls, and I don't think that can last long term. Something has to give, and I actually think Elon Musk recently sent an email to his employees about his 6 productivity hacks, and most of them were around avoid large meetings. If you're in a meeting and you're not contributing or getting anything out of it, just get up and leave. And I think if you move that concept onto Zoom calls, it actually it might help enormously, or just make them shorter or more to the point. I think I think we all need to work out how to handle that.
I have to agree there. Sorry, that's a very good point, Chris, because I'm a very direct person. Probably you've seen that here today, and it's the bane of my life is people going, I feel that Zoom calls in particular, people feel like they need to talk a little bit more and for longer, and I just agree with you on that point, because there's nothing like a face-to-face meeting. Being in someone's energy, being direct, understanding their body language, getting what you need out of them and moving on, It's a great point.
I do think there'll be more opportunities for students finishing with digital technology backgrounds because businesses are looking to move forward. Everyone's trying to get in. So I do think it depends on the business and it depends on the job. It's not that they will have a better chance of getting the job of every job, but I do think there will be more employers looking for people with a digital background to get in and to rework their business and to make sure that if we ever have another COVID, every business is set up to go. And I do think that will be there, but I don't think they'd necessarily, if you're in finance, you're in finance. It's not really that's not what they're looking for. It totally depends on the job.
Okay. Well, there actually was another question just regarding Zoom meetings, basically saying meetings can often waste valuable time. Do you see them becoming more efficient now that they're taking place online? But I think probably you've answered the question already anyway.
No.
Yeah.
Getting worse, I think.
Yeah. Just another interesting question is travel time can be criticized, considered wasteful, but it did or does give time for people to think and reflect outside of the office environment. Does working from home mean that, it's all task-oriented work and less time for innovation or less time for thinking? Reasonable question.
I think your travel time, though, is before you start work. And it's that bit that we're taking out. So you can go out for a walk or spend time with your family.
Yeah.
You can reflect at home. It's up to you. We're taking away the time you spend sitting in a car getting to work. No one's expecting you to start work earlier if you want to, as many people have said, some of us do. We just get it done. But I do think the opportunity is there. So yeah, it can be your time that you get your headspace, but you can also go out for a walk.
Yeah, and probably it does relate to the type of travel. I think big difference between sitting in a commute for an hour and a half from Carlow and maybe having a few hours on a plane where you can, sit back and really relax or whatever. So probably does depend. In
my past life, I actually flew to the UK on a Tuesday and flew home on a Thursday. And as much as I said you have this time, I used it to work. I didn't sit back and reflect. Okay. I had no choice. And as much as everyone says it's great you sit back, it's not. It is very tiring, and I don't think it's quite as reflective as everyone is until you do it.
I'm sure you really miss it.
Oh, I miss it terribly.
Anybody else? Any views on that? Okay, so I think we've pretty much covered all of our questions. So I did say I'd come back with one question at the end, which is, we're hopefully at the finish line with vaccines coming through. Hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months, we'd see a return to normality. So what will the balance be, do you think? I suppose, is it going to be status quo, stays as it is? Is it going to go back to the way it was? Is it a hybrid? And, what do you think it will be, or what do you think it should be?
I've always dreamt of a work environment where you work just to get the position or the role, the job done, and you clock off. Now, unfortunately, being a founder, that's just non-existent in my world, but I certainly want to run a team and have a vision for a company. And that's what we are creating, as a digital company that works on a project base, and they have this work-life balance that we always dreamt of before COVID. So I see really, really positive things with working from home and having digital teams that you can work with across the globe. I love that I can hire all throughout Ireland. I love the fact that people can buy homes and they don't have to commute into the city. So I find it a very positive experience.
Yeah, I think notwithstanding the social aspect of work and how powerful that is and how we have to find a way around it, I think, to take a slightly wider view, the history of human progress is getting ideas from people's brains into the real world. And that has never been easier than it is today. And it has never been cheaper than it is today in terms of the online tools you have available to make something go from your mind to real life. It's absolutely inspiring, and I think it'll be hugely positive for all of us.
Yeah,
I think we'll end up with a hybrid model, just to work with people's personalities as well, and the support that different people need, and on the dependencies of different job roles. So I think it's a watch this space, and each company will be slightly different, but we'll all have some sort of a hybrid.
Right. I would agree with us as well. And I've already seen that kind of being implemented, because in the US, they're not as strict with lockdown in many of the states, if you've heard the news. So that's kind of already happening. And I think people are enjoying the kind of go into the office once or twice a week and then go home, have that flexibility that you need. We are talking, about downsizing our offices. So those who want to be in the office can still do that. But then other ones, maybe, they're 2 days at home, 3 days in the office. I think with the technology that's out there, as we've all talked about, it's doable. And you've got a good dry run over the last 8-9 months on what works and what doesn't work.
Right. Okay, well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I think that was a really good session. Just before wrapping up, just want to thank Cara, Sharon, Chris, and Deirdre for taking your time. Very insightful, interesting talk, and thank you for participating. I think it was very valuable. I hope people, found this interesting and learned from it. I found it very, very interesting. So a lot of really good kind of ideas or views on the topics. On a very practical level, I've certainly learned that I either need to get a good Zoom backdrop or background like Cara has, or I need to tidy up my office. So that's my
disappear. It's kind of funny when your hands don't show up in the.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Well, I think maybe an afternoon of tidying the office might be the better approach. So just to say, for those interested, there are more sessions of Transform Work taking place at the same time each day this week until Friday the 11th. The registration link can be found on the DCU Business School and .lab channels for everyone who would like to listen in. So in the meantime, everyone stay safe. Thanks again for joining. Thanks for all your input. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.